Hello, my dear masterminds. Let me tell you what happened in all those moments when you stayed quiet, when you chose silence over explanation, when you let your presence do the communicating while your mouth remained still. Something profound occurred. Something most people never understand because they're too busy filling every silence with words, every pause with noise, every moment with unnecessary explanation. You discovered the most powerful form of communication that exists. Not the words you speak, but the energy you carry. Not the explanations you offer, but the frequency you carry. Not the arguments you make, but the presence you embody. And in discovering this, in claiming this silent power, you became someone who never needs to say a word to be completely understood. Your presence spoke volumes. It communicated truths that language could never capture. It conveyed understanding that words would only diminish. It transmitted messages that bypassed the mind entirely and landed directly in the consciousness of everyone around you. And the beautiful part? You didn't even try. You simply existed. An existence at your frequency is the most eloquent statement anyone can make. But here's what most people never realize about silence. The quiet that unsettles them isn't empty. It's full. And that fullness is what they're actually sensing. There's a specific quality to your silence that makes it powerful. It's not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. It's not the quiet of confusion or uncertainty or fear of speaking. It's the silence of someone who has so much depth that words feel inadequate, so much presence that explanation seems unnecessary, so much certainty that proving anything would diminish the truth. When you're silent, people don't hear emptiness. They feel fullness, a completeness that doesn't need verbal validation, a wholeness that doesn't require linguistic confirmation, a depth that makes small talk feel trivial and explanation feel superficial. Your silence creates space, and in that space, real communication happens. The kind that moves through energy and frequency rather than sound and syntax. Most people are deeply unsettled by silence. They fill it immediately with words, jokes, observations, anything to avoid the unease of quiet. But you've learned to be comfortable in silence, to exist in it without pressure, to let it stretch and expand without feeling the need to collapse it with unnecessary noise. Think about it. When someone grounded enters a room and says nothing, everyone pays attention. When someone uncertain enters and says nothing, everyone feels uncomfortable. Same silence, different energy. People feel the difference immediately. Because silence from center is different than silence from fear. Quiet from confidence is different than quiet from insecurity. Not speaking because you're whole is different than not speaking because you're empty. People feel the difference. They might not be able to articulate it, but their instincts know. Your silence comes from fullness, and fullness doesn't need to announce itself. So what did your presence say in all those moments when your mouth stayed closed? What messages were conveyed through your energy, your frequency, your being? Here's what they received without you speaking a single word. Messages that landed deeper than any explanation could reach. Your presence said, I am complete within myself. I don't need your validation to feel whole. I don't require your approval to know my worth. I don't depend on your understanding to move forward with certainty. This message landed in everyone around you, made them feel either inspired by your self-sufficiency or unsettled by your lack of need. But either way, they received it clearly. Your presence communicated boundaries without you having to draw lines. People knew instinctively what was acceptable and what wasn't, what you would tolerate and what you wouldn't, what energy you would engage with and what you would simply allow to pass by you without reaction. All of this understood through frequency, through the invisible field of energy that surrounds you and establishes natural boundaries without verbal negotiation. Your presence conveyed strength without you having to demonstrate it. Not the performative strength of loud declarations and forceful displays, but the real strength of quiet certainty, of calm and chaos, of steadiness under pressure, of being unshaken when everything around you is trembling. This strength was felt, recognized, respected, without a single word about how strong you are. There's a language that exists beyond words, beyond sounds and sentences and verbal expression. It's the language of energy, of frequency, of presence. And it's an early form of communication, one we still speak beneath all the talking we do. And here's the psychological truth. When someone's words and energy don't match, you trust the energy. When someone's words and silence don't match, you believe the silence. Your silence and energy were perfectly aligned. That's why people believed everything it said. This language communicates through feeling, through sensing, through the personal presence each human carries, and that interacts with every other presence in proximity. When you're in someone's presence, your awareness is reading theirs, gathering information, assessing energy, understanding things about them that they might not even know about themselves. All of this happening beneath conscious awareness. You've become fluent in this language, conscious of what your energy is saying, aware of what messages your frequency transmits, intentional about what your presence communicates, not in a controlling way, but in an authentic way. You've aligned your energy with your truth, made your frequency match your values, ensured your presence reflects your genuine being, and that alignment makes your silent communication powerful, clear, undeniable. When your words match your energy, people trust you. When your words conflict with your energy, people distrust you, even if they don't know why. But when your energy is so clear, so strong, so authentic, that it communicates everything without words needing to be added, that's when you've mastered the deepest form of communication. That's when your presence truly speaks volumes. You reached a point where words became not just unnecessary, but actually inadequate. Where trying to explain yourself verbally would only limit the communication that was already happening through your presence. Where speaking would reduce the message rather than enhance it. And that's when something shifted. You stopped seeing silence as absence and started recognizing it as the purest form of presence. Words have limitations. They're interpreted through the listener's filters, their biases, their understanding or misunderstanding of language. Two people can hear the same sentence and receive completely different messages. Words are imprecise, easily misunderstood, subject to all kinds of distortion between the speaker's intention and the listener's reception. But energy is often more consistent than words. Presence communicates directly to the intuitive level, where truth is recognized before thought processes it. This is why you stopped explaining yourself, stopped defending your choices, stopped justifying your decisions. Not because you couldn't articulate your reasoning, because your presence already communicated everything that mattered. And adding words would only dilute the clarity of that communication, would only give people something to argue with, something to misinterpret, something to turn on you. When you entered spaces silently, when you observed without commenting, when you existed without explaining, people felt specific things from you. The meeting where everyone was performing. You sat quietly, observed, said nothing. By the end, they were looking to you for approval. You never offered. The dinner where others filled every silence with noise. You were comfortable in the quiet. They remembered you most, the conversation, where someone tried to unsettle you into defending yourself. You simply existed. They left frustrated. You left unchanged. They felt respect from you. Not given automatically, but offered to those who earned it through their own presence, their own energy, their own authenticity. And they felt the absence of respect for those operating from performance, from pretense, from lack of substance. All of this communicated without judgment being verbally expressed, just through the quality of attention you gave or withdrew. They felt acceptance from you for authenticity, for realness, for people being genuinely themselves. And they felt the subtle rejection of fakeness, of performance, of people trying too hard to be something they're not. Your energy welcomed the real and made the false feel uncomfortable without you saying a single word about what you value. They felt boundaries from you, clear, solid, non-negotiable boundaries, not expressed through statements like "don't do this" or "that's not okay," but through the energetic field that simply wouldn't accept certain influences, that would reflect back energy that didn't match your frequency, that would create natural distance from what didn't align. All of this established silently, through presence, through the invisible but undeniable communication of your being. Some people felt incredibly comfortable with your silence, found peace in it, relief in it, like your quiet presence created space for them to just be without performance, without pressure, without the exhausting requirement to fill every moment with words and noise and demonstration. And here's what these people recognized. Your silence wasn't rejecting them. It was inviting them into something deeper than conversation. These were usually the people who were also comfortable with themselves, who had their own depth, their own center, their own relationship with silence. They recognized in your quiet the same quality they carried in themselves, and there was a mutual respect, a mutual understanding, a communication that happened in the silence that was richer than any conversation could have been. They sat with you in that quiet and felt understood, felt seen, felt recognized for who they actually are, beneath all the roles and performances and social masks. Your silence gave them permission to drop their own masks, to stop performing, to just exist. And in that shared silence, deeper connection happened than hours of talking ever creates. This is the gift of your presence. Not just that it speaks volumes, but that it creates space for others to speak their truth, too, or to not speak and simply be. But others were deeply uncomfortable with your silence, filled with inner unease by it, compelled to fill it with words and questions and observations because the quiet felt threatening to them, and their discomfort wasn't about you. It was about them, about what your silence revealed about their relationship with themselves. People who struggle with silence often struggle with self-reflection, can't be comfortable in their own presence. Your silence compelled them into that internal awareness, made them conscious of the noise in their own minds, made them feel the lack of peace in their own being. And that was uncomfortable. So they talked at you, filled the space with words you didn't ask for. All of it an attempt to relieve their own discomfort with the silence. Here's the truth they were avoiding. Your silence was a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They simply reflect. And not everyone is ready to see what gets reflected back. Your presence was a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw reflected back. But you didn't break your silence to make them comfortable. Didn't fill the space with unnecessary words just to ease their anxiety. You held your ground, maintained your frequency, let them feel whatever they needed to feel without taking responsibility for managing their discomfort. Of course, some people misinterpreted your silence, made up stories about what it meant, decided you were shy or cold or aloof or arrogant, projected their own narratives onto your quiet. You were labeled stuck up because you didn't engage in superficial conversation, called withdrawn because you didn't perform enthusiasm for meaningless small talk, termed mysterious or difficult or intimidating because your quiet presence stirred inner discomfort they didn't know how to process. But here's what you learned. You can't control what people make up about your silence, can't prevent their projections, can't stop their stories. And trying to explain yourself to people determined to misunderstand you is exhausting and pointless. So you stopped trying, let them think whatever they needed to think. And in that moment of releasing the need to be understood by everyone, you claimed a freedom most people never experience. You know who you are. You know what your silence means. You know the depth and fullness and intentionality behind your quiet. Their misinterpretations don't change that reality. Don't diminish your truth. Don't affect your center. You exist unchanged by their inability to understand. When you did choose to speak, your words carried weight that most people's words never carry, because they were rare, selective, chosen carefully. Think about the person who talks constantly. When they finally say something important, does anyone notice? Now think about the person who rarely speaks. When they finally do, everyone stops. Same words potentially, different impact. Scarcity often increases value. Your silence made your words gold. People listened when you spoke, leaned in, paid attention, because they knew if you were using words, it mattered. If you were breaking your silence, it was significant. Your previous silence made your occasional words powerful, gave them weight, made them land with impact. And what you said when you spoke was different than what most people say. It wasn't small talk, wasn't gossip. When you opened your mouth, substance came out, truth came out, something worth hearing came out. Your silence evolved. In the beginning, maybe it came from uncertainty, from not knowing what to say, but over time, it transformed, deepened, became intentional rather than reactive, became a choice rather than a default, became a strength rather than a limitation. You learned the difference between silence from fear and silence from center, between quiet from confusion and quiet from clarity. Now your silence is conscious. You choose it, carry it, use it strategically when it serves truth better than words would. You're not silent because you can't speak. You're silent because you recognize that in many situations, presence speaks more clearly than language. Energy communicates more honestly than explanation. Being transmits more powerfully than talking. This conscious silence is unshakable. Your practice of presence over words taught you profound things. You learned that the most important things are often felt rather than said, That depth is recognized silently. That real understanding happens in the space between words rather than in the words themselves. You learn to trust energy over statements, to believe what you feel more than what you hear, to recognize authenticity through frequency rather than through articulation. Most importantly, you learn that your worth doesn't depend on your ability to explain it, that your value doesn't require verbal defense, that your truth doesn't need linguistic justification. You simply are, and that being is enough. Long after encounters with you, people remember your presence more than any words you might have spoken. They remember how they felt around you, what your energy communicated, how your silence affected them. Some remember feeling seen by you even though you barely spoke to them. Seen in a way that words never accomplish. Your silence saw them, really saw them. Others remember feeling uncomfortable, feeling challenged by your presence, not because you did anything to them, but because your authentic being reflected back their inauthenticity. You've claimed a form of influence that doesn't require announcement, doesn't need declaration. It's the influence of presence, the guidance of being, the strength of existing so completely in your truth that others naturally orient around you. This is true strength, not the kind that demands recognition, but the kind that receives it naturally. So yes, disciplined individual, you never needed to say a word. Your presence spoke volumes. It communicated truths that language could never capture. It conveyed depth that words would only diminish. You discovered that the most powerful communication happens in silence, that the deepest connections form without words, that real understanding occurs through presence rather than through language. Keep holding your silence when silence is more powerful. Keep speaking through presence when presence says more. Keep existing in your truth without feeling the need to verbalize it constantly. Because what you are speaks so loudly that what you say becomes optional. Your presence will keep speaking volumes, keep communicating truths, keep conveying depth, all without you needing to say a single word. Because you've learned what few people ever learn. That being is the most articulate statement anyone can make. That existence at your frequency is more eloquent than any speech. That presence is the language of strength. Welcome to the eloquence of silence, disciplined individual, where nothing needs to be said because everything is already understood. Understood.